Sahana vavatu, sahano bhunaktu, sahaviryam karavavahe, tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we be nurtured together. May we be nourished together. May we strive together. May our learning shine. And may we not quarrel. Peace. So by verse 32, Krishna has completed Dhyana Palam, that is the benefit of meditation. We need to know what's the point in order to do something. The mind demands a reason. Because it does so, we need to give it a good reason. So now let's quickly revise the process of meditation. We said chapter 6, Jnana Yoga has 5 parts. The first one we started off, disciplines throughout life. Bahiranga Sadhanam was the first one, which means Yamaha included, and it also included Niyamaha. Yamaha means values, and Niyamaha disciplines or do's and don'ts throughout life. If we don't follow these, then by the time the mind goes to meditation, then it will be focusing on worldly disturbances. This is why it's very important to have a smooth life and to attempt to have a smooth life with your best effort, because that's going to carry over in meditation and into your sincere efforts. Also, Bahiranga Sadhanam, or general disciplines throughout life, involves Karma Yoga. That's the whole chapter 3. So smooth life means Karma Yoga, or Yamaha and Niyamaha. And we also spoke about the 2 disciplines, which is self-confidence and self-control. If we don't have self-confidence in ourselves, then everything is going to fail, because the person is going to give up and say, I'm not good enough, I'm not in the right place at the right time, and I need to move on, and there's something better for me. So you need to find confidence in yourself, which means I can and I will, no matter what. No matter what life throws at me, I will do it. So it's that very firm, assertive stand, giving and telling yourself that you indeed have all the resources to do this. And also self-control means that the mind has to be consistently looked at mindfully, which is what Karma Yoga is. Mindfully means everything's looked at consciously versus reactively. So this is reaction versus response. So our job in life is to convert our reactions into responses. Then we talked about the second stage in Dhyana Yoga, which is Antaranga Sadhanam, which is general disciplines right before meditation. And this included 3 parts. The first was asanam, then pranayama, and pratyahara. This means, first of all, before meditating, find a peaceful place, a holy place, a sacred place, a spiritual place. And then, once you're in that place, sit down, find a posture, keep your back erect, spine straight. Find a comfortable posture that's not going to annoy the person in 5 or 10 minutes. And then, once the posture has been found, move on to pranayama, which means even breathing, which means that the breathing is to be stabilized. So that, why? Because the breathing and the mind are interrelated. So this means if the breathing is fast, what does this represent? The mind is also fast. If there is fear, how do you breathe? Very fast. This means the breathing and the mind are interrelated. Meaning thus that if I shorten down the pace of my breath, I automatically shorten and slow down the tempo of the mind. Once that's done, we move on to pratyahara, which means withdrawing the mind. How? We also said as though focusing on the tip of your nose, meaning what? Eyes partially closed. And also what helps is to ensure that your senses do not pick up too much data. One recommendation in the modern world, this is a personal recommendation, is Bose QC35. They have a very good noise cancellation system, and they're able to cancel out ambience or talking or anything, and it can help a lot. Another thing is to maybe put a blindfold on so that the light does not come into the eyes and bring in that daytime energy. Then, once the mind has been withdrawn, we move on to what? The next stage, which is Dhyana Swarupam, which is the process of meditation, and that includes Dharana, Dhyanam, and Samadhi. Dharana means what? It means the process whereby one foot is still in the world and one foot is attempting to zoom in the lens onto what? Atma thoughts. So this is the stage of battling between wife, children, and your journey. So this stage involves constantly looking at things that are going through the mind and using whatever you've got, whatever resources to bring it back onto Atma-related thoughts. Once the struggle has been going on for a while, struggle means what? Is the stage of dharana. Then that struggle becomes a little bit more spontaneous, which means that dhyanam starts to take over, and dhyanam is the stage of spontaneous focus upon the thoughts of Atma related. And once dhyanam has been sustained for a while, then as a result of the momentum of that sustenance of the thought onto Atma thoughts, what happens? Spontaneous, automatic, autopilot focus called samadhi. This means the struggle is no longer required. Yep.
What was Atma thoughts again?
Atma-related thoughts is in a stage of dharana. You begin to entertain them. That means thoughts related to the self.
Okay.
Chaitanyam Swarupa. Any thoughts regarding my nature as consciousness. Next stage, Dhyanam Palam. What is the benefit of meditation? So this is where we answer what's in it for you. And this is very important in Vedanta because the mind is going to then go back into the world. You know this from your own experience. So you need to keep reminding yourself. Now, Shravanam knowledge, which has been totally assimilated through what? Mananam, that means I have listened to the knowledge, and then by listening, I have then grasped it. How? Through reflecting on it by asking questions related to that knowledge, which is the stage of Mananam. That brings the person into a stage of transforming your personality in accordance with the Shastra. That's what it comes down to. If the personality does not carry over into crisis, then it's not working. So your barometer gauge of whether Vedanta is working or not is you're able to remain focused, remaining abiding in the self, even in the worst crises. So this means that the Vedanta benefit is not to make the world changed according to your likes and dislikes, because that's impossible, right? That's it's a hard battle, because likes and dislikes are always changing in themselves, but also the world is also changing. So this does not involve changing a wife to think like you or changing a husband to think like you, because what's wrong with them? There's nothing wrong with them. They're also very much in their journey, and we need to let them be in their journey. That is love, basically, unconditional love. You're letting them be as they are. So this really is about you. And what does this mean? When it's about you, it means that you do not change the world according to your likes and dislikes, but the benefit is you become immune to the worldly changes, to the worldly circumstances. So what's the Vedanta benefits? Immunity. Injection, immunity to worldly ups and downs. So, therefore, Shravanam and Mananam leads to assimilated knowledge, and to convert assimilated knowledge into a personality transformation, we need what? Nididhyasanam, and that is called the transference of Atma Jnanam into Jnana Nishtha. Jnana nishtha means knowledge which is well, firmly established in one's life, and it cannot be forgotten even in crises. What's the other benefit of Dhyanam Palam? Your devotion to Ishvara reaches its peak. What does this mean? All that is here is one. That means there's no greater devoter of Ishvara than the one who has fully assimilated that all that is here is one. So your peak of devotion reaches to its maximum. And what else is the benefit is that one is no longer bound or influenced or manipulated by the world or people, including those that are close to them. Why? Because you're letting them be as they are. There's nothing wrong with them, there's nothing wrong with you, and your understanding or your focus goes from what? Personality into what? The self. That is, what is the one common factor that we both share? Awareness. And that is what the focus of a jnani goes, especially in grihastha ashrama. Otherwise, if the focus goes towards personality, there will be inevitable conflict. So, in other words, there's a psychological freedom. We're still on Dhyanam Palam. What's the benefit? There's a psychological freedom from your own problems and other people's problems. That's the benefit. In other words, everyone is looked at with equal detachment. What does this mean? Why is everyone looked with equal detachment? Because everyone is part of the whole. And therefore, because you understand that you're also the whole, what is there to modify amidst the whole? The question, Ashley?
Ishvara, is it?
Huh? Ishvara.
Ishvara, what is that?
Cause.
Cause.
The cause of the universe. Okay.
It's like the source of the universe. So the source of our being, source of the universe.
Ishvara is the causal body of the entire universe, that upon which everything comes from.
Okay.
The source of all.
Okay, so that's what we want to get to, like our focus on that.
Yes, we want to love and appreciate and understand that the difference between self and that is essentially one and the same. So we want to remove what's called non-essential variables. What are they? What's the non-essential variable? Your body, your mind, your emotions, your feelings. And when you come down to the variable which you can no longer reduce, what is that? Your awareness. So now the fifth topic that we're going to get onto between verse 33 and 36 is meditation, obstacles, and remedies. Because we're going to ask now, what about those obstacles that arise during meditation? How do I remove them? And they're called dhyana pratibandha pariharao. Just meditation, obstacles, and remedies. Okay, let's do verse 33. Arjuna uvacha yoyam yogastvaya proktaha. You can go together. Samyena madhusudana etasyaham napashyami chanchalatvat sthitim stiram. Okay, Arjuna begins his complaining process. This is good because we're going to now relate to Arjuna's complaint regarding the unstoppable, the monkey nature of the mind. And then we're going to deal with how to master our monkey minds. Okay, so verses 33 to 36 is about how to subdue, sublimate the mind which apparently or seemingly seems hard to control. We're going to talk about, in verse 33, 4 obstacles. They're not mentioned here, of course. That's why the Vedanta teacher's job is to take different Upanishads and put them in the right context. So I will talk about the 4 obstacles, which comes from Mandukya Karika. Okay, so verse 33 talks about the mind which is undisciplined, which has a disadvantage. And that disadvantage of an undisciplined mind is it listens to Vedanta and it turns it into an intellectual understanding, and it cannot truly assimilate it into a transformational personality. That's the problem. So if this is not working and it's not changing your life, then you know what the problem is. The mind is still agitated. And this creates a double personality. Means what? One personality says, Aham Brahmanasmi, my nature is Brahman, but the other part of the personality says, or is, an expression of disturbed emotions, easily disturbed emotionally, still agitated easily by people, by colleagues, by family. Your brother, your sister, your mom, your dad's opinion still matters a lot. It's though as if someone can say that you don't know an opinion about something, it doesn't matter. But as soon as someone close to us says something, it matters a world of a difference. Those kinds of things have to be slowly erased. Okay, so in other words, there is a gap between what I know, and what do you know? Aham Brahmanasmi, the nature between yourself, the Jiva, the Jagat, and Ishvara are one and the same. That's what you know. So there is a gap between that and what else? Between what you are. What are you in real life? Anything other than limitless. In other words, the person knows I am limitless, and yet they're still acting as though they're limited. They know that my nature is immortal, it is endless, it is beautiful, it is perfect, and yet in real life the person is still attending to worldly matters, still improving themselves as though something is wrong with you, right? So there is a big gap between what I know, Aham Brahmanasmi, and what I am in actuality. That means the personality does not reflect what I know. So that gap we have to bring closer. So the problem is not, this is the conclusion, the problem is not lack of knowledge. What's the problem? The problem is a lack of mental discipline, called mano nigrahaha. I will say this word often, mano nigrahaha, mano nigrahaha. Okay? So the problem is not knowledge, it is lack of mind mastery. The mind is not disciplined. That is the problem. So, this also means that meditation is not compulsory for everyone, by the way. It is not necessary for every Vedantic student. Why? Because only if there is a gap between what you know and what you are, only then you need meditation. You don't need meditation if your life represents Vedanta 24/7. Is that clear? So that means the moment you wake up in the worst crisis with your closest family, if you are still Vedantan, no different than in the class or when you're reading a book by yourself, then you got no problems. If there's a big gap, then you've got some issues. Which we need to close that gap. So today's session is about how to close that gap. So the question is going to arise now, and it's going to say, why do some people have this problem of gap distance and some people don't? What's this distance defining factor? Did you ever think about that? What makes someone come into a Vedanta class and gets it within 2 sessions, and someone who goes to years, 10 plus years, 20 years, which is very common by the way, and still it remains on the intellectual level? That's a question worth investigating. One is karma indeed. Did you say karma? Yeah, it is. So that means their actions.
Identity.
Huh?
Identity.
Very strong identity with the world, and they're refusing to let it go because it's very comfortable to remain in the world. 1 foot in the world, right? And it has to be a priority. So the situation goes like this. Before you come to Vedanta, most of us are already unqualified. And when we go into Vedanta, we carry that unqualification into Vedanta class. So, what does this mean? If the person is unqualified and they come into Vedanta, they need meditation. if the person was qualified, they had viveka and vairagyam, that is discrimination and dispassion, and they transfer that into class of Vedanta, it works amazingly fast. That means if you already had a life of austerities, tapas, a lot of puja, a lot of meditation, a lot of worship, a lot of prayer, and you bring that into Vedanta, it's going to work like magic. If that was not the case, because for most of us grihastha ashramas, householders, we don't have much time, because why? We're always addressing issues between ourselves and our partners, between ourselves and our colleagues. So because of that, we bring that lack of qualification into the class, and it doesn't work that fast. So these verses are about how to fix that anyway, despite not having the qualifications. So this discipline called Mano Nigrahaha is attained where? Or where is it done? Inside meditation, Nididhyasanam. So now Krishna is going to not answer what these 4 obstacles are. That's why I'm bringing it from Mandukya Karika. And the 4 obstacles go like this. 4 obstacles of what? During meditation. The first obstacle is layaha. Dullness, sleepiness, fatigue, tired, excess tamas. You sit down for meditation and we drift off. Layaha is the first obstacle. What we have to understand is feel guilty not about layaha, because this is a universal problem. Whatever you're experiencing, someone else is also experiencing. So the tamaguna is dominant, and that makes the person sleep. So there's 4 causes of layaha. The first is full stomach. Bahu ashanam. Bahu ashanam. You've eaten a lot, and thus all the blood goes into digestion alone, and the intellect is thinking how to digest this and not thinking about atma, anatma viveka. Okay, the second is indigestion, ajirna. Obviously, if you've eaten, then the food remains undigested. This is also why you should ideally be careful how you eat and how heavy the foods are. Because suppose the person eats all day and those foods are very heavy. So this means CPU processing power of 20% goes constantly into digesting the food, which means 20% less into contemplation. The third obstacle that is the cause of sleep, of sleepiness and tiredness and fatigue, is backlog of sleep. Haven't slept for a while, had to do your work. Nidra sheshaha. This means suppose that you had to do a project in your work, and you got, of course, you got to attend your family, and plus you got to do your project. It's important, and so you say, let me sleep. Let me just sleep 6 hours. I'm going to sleep 6 hours today. Suppose you sleep 8 hours. So I'm just going to shave off 2 hours just to catch it, just to sort of, get all this done. Can't get away with it. It's not going to work. This is going to catch on slowly. And what's going to happen is your personality is going to take on this layaha, this fatigue, tiredness. And what's the source? Backlog of sleep. And the last cause is, Pavlov dog? Ding, 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 woof, woof. In other words, by association, when the eyes close, what happens? Drifting of time to sleep. Apyasaha. Apyasaha means the association of closing eyes means action of sleeping. Now the solution of layaha is first karma yoga. Why? Because karma yoga reduces tamas and increases rajas. The second solution is removing the cause of sleep. What does this mean? Removing the 4 causes that I just explained. Don't overeat, in other words. Get the right sleep, in other words. And also ask yourself, what could be causing me to fall asleep constantly? So that's your job to discover. And finally, practice. everyone who starts to meditate falls asleep. This is a universal problem. So after some time of trying to stay awake, fall asleep, stay awake, after some time, guaranteed you will get it. Okay. Now the second is vikshepaha. This is the second obstacles. Vikshepaha is extrovertedness, a mind that is overactive, hyperactive. How do they call it? ADD, right? What is ADD? What's
Attention deficit.
Attention deficit.
and there's another word, obsessive compulsive disorder, right? So that's the one. So they're constantly hyperactive. There's too much going on in life. There's too many spikes in the mind. So this is completely opposite layaha. And the mind's extroverted, always entertaining thoughts. What can I do today? What can I clean around the house? What can I plant? What new food can I cook? And so on. It always wants to do something. The solution is, number one, to vikshepaha, practice. Practice means what? Take this word down. Abhyasa viveka. Abhyasa means what? Exercise, practice. And viveka means discrimination, discernment, categorization, knowing what belongs to what, knowing my priorities, knowing the lower from the higher, knowing what belongs to which shelf. That's viveka. And the second solution is vairagyam. Vairagyam is dispassion or detachment. What else does vairagyam mean? Detaching from the lower in order to attach to the higher. You can never detach from the world, by the way. You can only attach to the higher, and by the virtue of doing that, you automatically detach from the lower. Fourth is kashayaha.
What's the third, is it?
Huh?
Third.
And the third one, yeah. Kashayaha. So this is whereby the mind is neither asleep nor is it overactive. Is this called a twilight zone, right? You're in the middle of nowhere. You're neither overactive nor oversleeping. The mind just simply isn't functioning. It doesn't wander, and neither does it fall asleep. So why is this? The reason for this is because of tragic past events which were too much to handle at that time, and because they were too much to handle, I did not address them. And so they remain as lifelong trauma. And lifelong trauma shuts down the mind. And a mind that is shut down cannot think. And a mind that cannot think remains neither active nor sleepy. Just dull, basically. It doesn't know what to do. So for example, suppose you heard shocking news as a 5-year-old. Someone died. A cousin or an auntie died. And you didn't know how to address a death of a person. And it was too much to handle at that time. Because we didn't have the proper emotional attachments or management system, then what happened? We quickly went back into our toys. So the trauma of someone's death was not looked into properly. And because we were distracted quickly by the worldly matters, that trauma stays. And that trauma has to go somewhere. And that trauma has to get expressed somehow. And that trauma causes this third problem, kashayaha, where the mind just simply remains in a non-functional state. It operates at a 80% performance, suppose, or even a 40% performance. This also is a result of hidden complaints. Suppose you're complaining about someone and you just leave it at that. And then you just walk on and do your own thing. This hidden complaint actually left a scar. That's why we cannot get away with putting down anything, because it always leaves a scar. Every single judgment adds onto kashayaha. This is also a result of suppressed sorrows and joys, overexcitement, or something that was excessively sorrowful in life at some time. You may not remember it, but it's there. Or over happy. And as a result of that, we haven't looked at that properly. So it what causes a distortion in our experience. So just think, for example, your body has a ability to shut down when there's an excessive pain mechanism. That's possible if you experience that. I think also women can do that when they give birth. They modify, or the inherent system of pain mechanism reduces in order to give birth to the child. So the body has that ability, but so does the mind. That's why I say, when there is an excessive trauma in life, excessive pain, excessive shocking news, which one was not ready to handle at that moment of time, what happened? The mind didn't have the right framework how to manage it, and so it just shut off. And because it shut off, it plays that trauma at some point in our unconscious mind, and what happens? It then limits our experience throughout life. So we just sort of kind of walk around in this twilight zone. This also happens in mostly Grihastha ashrama. Why? If you think about it, suppose you are with someone. Now, I'm not, specifically mentioning anyone particularly, but suppose one is with another. What is spent most of the time? Addressing problems in the present. Or not even problems, but situations. Addressing common householder situations. Now, do you think you're going to have much time for the past to surface in that kind of situation? Probably not. For the past to surface, you need to have a proper, peaceful environment. If one's constantly engaged with problems of right now, situations of right now, what can we do? Where can we go? This and that, constantly. It doesn't give time for past to surface up so that you may look at it and then dissolve it. Shankara also calls this raga, dvesha, viryam. So raga, dvesha, viryam means strong likes and dislikes, which are in potential because of a stunned mind. The mind was stunned. It was shocked by something in the past. And because it was shocked, it left that raga, dvesha in potential. And that's a burden for the mind. So we carry around that burden and we don't know what it is. Something's agitating me, but I don't know what it is. What is that? Kashayaha. Okay, so what's the solution? Okay, the solution actually is counterintuitive. Depends on what you've heard. Some of us think that you need to hold it in and you need to resolve it, right, by yourself. Vedanta does not say that. Vedanta says you need to let it out. Externalize it. If you need to shout like crazy, do so under one condition, as long as it is dharmic. If I shout on the beach and everyone hears me, I'm going to what? Intercept their own minds and cause them pain. So you need to shout in the car where nobody's going to hear you, do that there. If you need to scream, do that somewhere where nobody can hear you. So Vedanta says, from one aspect, of course, it's not the only aspect that it says, let it out and resolve it out loud, openly to yourself, but never keep it inside, because inside is just going to keep boiling. Okay, solution is let it out. If you want to cry, do it. Actually, some therapies suggest this. They get the patient to sit down on the chair and they say, just let it out. And we often think, why? You're just reinforcing your habits if you just let it out. Well, there is a meaning to that, but also at the same time, it doesn't necessarily mean you're just reinforcing it. You just need to let it out. Punch the pillow or something. Super clear? Questions so far?
Just a quick question. When you say Vedanta, what is that encompassing? Is that encompassing other...
Vedanta includes the Bhagavad Gita and every single Upanishads, 108 of them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Vedanta means the knowledge which, after which, having gone, you no longer need any knowledge. The knowledge once known, all knowledge is known. Because that which pervades everything, once that's known and identified with, there's nothing else to know. Okay.
When you're talking about the Mandukya, you're talking about the Mandukya Upanishad.
Not Mandukya Upanishad, Mandukya Karika, written by Gaudapada Acharya, which is like a commentary on the Mandukya. So there's these Karikas, which not many people know of, but they're not the Upanishads necessarily. They're also a mixture of Upanishads and some commentaries. Yes, Lloyd?
If you said that you might not be aware of those situations that caused all this previous pain.
Yeah.
So could it be that, you know, we're hiding something, we're not admitting something to us,
Yeah.
but we feel something, and then should we try and act it out even though we don't really, I don't know, I feel like I've come to this situation before where do I really need to try and act out these terrible situations in order to find something possibly?
Well, I mean, yes, act it out as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else around
Yeah, I
you.
know.
That's the only rule.
I can go out where no one is and try and cry or try and...
See, if that suits your personality, yes. Some of us are not like that. Some of us do that alone. Some of us do that in the room. Some of us need to let it out. So it depends. Honor your personality. So it's not going to be like that for everyone because we've got different temperaments.
Bring it up into the consciousness.
Yeah.
But some people may still like to find the cause and of that understanding of that situation.
Yeah.
Why it happened.
Yeah.
And sometimes that helps.
That helps. The analysis, looking at it from different angles. What did I not learn during this event? What could have I missed that if I look at it now, that I may potentially learn something? Is there a question? On the Zoom?
Did you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there must be a lot of things though that are forgotten either in this life or past.
Yeah.
And so is the method for addressing that is karma yoga then? That's really the only, because you can't analyze that, you don't remember it.
Yeah. Okay, good question. So this also joins with the Lloyd's question. So suppose something comes out, that is the best time to address it. Because it's most relevant in the moment right now. It carries a truthful, authentic emotion in that moment. So what does this mean? Do not look for things like, let me analyze my life, like past life regression. Okay, there's a purpose for that. But let me look over what happened in 11, 10, 9. No, just wait for triggers to happen. And that's the perfect time to look at it and address it in the light of that you can learn and dissolve it. What do I mean by learn and dissolve it? Just ask, can I look at this in a different way that empowers me? Okay, so you cannot recall your past life issues, but you can take your own behavior to be a symbolic form of those invisible past life issues, and that expresses as a physical expression or verbal expression, and then that is a giveaway, and that is an opportunity to address it in the moment. Not after, not before, when it's most relevant, right now. This is why I say to come into a conflict and then to say, I don't like conflict, so I'm just going to avoid it. That is a mistake. Because I'm just putting that onto the shelf, and I'm going to have to address that shelf at some point. And the more books of conflicts I have on my shelf, the heavier one feels. The more tamasic it builds the mind. Address it in the moment. So you need to learn to love, or not love, I don't think anyone loves confrontation. But you need to start appreciating the value of relevancy in the moment.
If you have a lot of stuff on the shelf, is there a sneaky way to get around having a look at all of that?
Yeah, okay. It has to be, see, even the law of energy says nothing in this world can be destroyed. And it has to go somewhere, right? So it has to go to whom? To the person who created that in the first place. So that means all your karmas, all your actions are associated to you alone. Otherwise, to put it away is to what? Give it onto someone else who rightfully does not deserve it. It has to go somewhere. Okay, so it's always related to you.
So it's about, you got to transmute it no matter what. So
Huh?
you've got to transmute it
basically.
You're going to change that. You're going to change it from that heavy energy into like empowering energy.
when it comes out, because that's the only time that you know it's actually there. Before, it's just sort of stories like, yeah, maybe I've got a little bit of this and that, but there's no relevance to it. It's just kind of like in the air. Okay. Fourth one, rasavadaha. So the fourth obstacle in meditation is meditation becomes like a relaxing journey. It becomes very pleasant. You start to enjoy it. You get high on meditation. And this joy that the person gets high on is not Atmananda. Atmananda. Why? Because it wasn't there before, now it is. Therefore, it is conditional. Anything that it comes and goes is not you. It's subject to arrival and departure. And what happens is people get associated and addicted to this highness feeling. And then they what? Go into meditation again to replicate and experience freedom at least for 1 hour. And that's actually technically escaping the world, escaping the problems. Now, what is Atmananda? What is the definition of Atmananda? Sense of fullness or completeness owning to what? Atmajnanam. Owning to knowledge. I'll give you an example. When a man proposes to a woman, what happens? It's either a no or a yes. Suppose it's a yes, okay? And it's a glad yes. What happens in that moment? The man, upon receiving the yes, in that moment feels very loved, fully loved. Why? Because he received the knowledge from this woman that I am completely loved. And the woman feels the same because she says, I am worthy enough to be proposed. So when she says, oh, she sees the ring, at least in the Western culture, then she's like, oh, he really loves me. I feel completely embraced in this moment. Similarly, when the man proposes and he hears that magical 3-character word, YES, he feels completely embodied. So what happened? What made them happy? The knowledge that I am completely loved. That kind of knowledge that I am completely loved by God alone is the same kind of knowledge of Atmananda. And when is God never not present, you cannot think of a single moment. Thus, to be loved by God is what kind of feeling? One of knowledge alone. That I am always loved. I am always full, always complete. And this fullness is always there in all situations. Now, the man and woman, they just experience the happiness for that one moment, right? How long does it last? 5 minutes. Tomorrow by 4 o'clock p.m. maximum, the peak is going to drop down. But now, just imagine that kind of fullness, that kind of yes, I want to marry you. That kind of fullness consistently, unceasingly. That's Atmananda, and it does not belong to emotions, even though it is expressed through emotions. It is caused by what? Atmajnanam. Is Zoom working for you?
No, it's gonna.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so the fourth one is rasavadaha, is when the person gets carried away by this pleasure, and this becomes an obstacle to meditation, and the person does not get a chance to convert Atmajnanam into Jnanam Nishtha, into something that is solid, something that is real, something that is thought about, reflected upon. So they miss the opportunity because they're addicted to the feeling. Okay, so and what's the purpose of Vedantic meditation? In order to carry Atma Jnanam not only in meditation but also out of meditation. If it's just in meditation, it is not Atma Jnanam, Atma Ananda. It is what? Conditional. Anything that has a beginning and an end cannot be true. It is only partial. In the same way, suppose that you're looking for Atmananda by withdrawing from the world. Suppose your family is giving you a hard time, and now suddenly your conclusion is, I'm just going to withdraw and I'm going to disconnect. Why? Because if I do withdraw and disconnect, I'm going to experience freedom. Is this real? It can't be real. Because when I was entangled, or I was with my family, it wasn't there. And now when I withdrew from my family, it's there. That's because it wasn't there before, it cannot be real. This is why we say it doesn't matter if you're in Grihastha Ashrama or a sannyasi. The point is, Atmananda does not cease whether I am out of meditation or in meditation, whether I'm a sannyasi or a Grihastha Ashrama. Okay, so what's the solution to this? Instead of dwelling on displeasure, which is obvious, instead you say, I am Purnaha Asangaha before and after meditation. Purnaha means full, Asangaha means independent. I am fully independent before meditation and after meditation. My true Ananda is only owned to what? Atma Jnanam, to knowledge alone. And what knowledge is that? I am full, indestructible, ever pure, ever present, ever complete, immortal, beautiful. That kind of knowledge produces sincere joy, and that cannot be destroyed by worldly crises. Okay, so let's ask a question. How do you tackle this? How do you tackle this? By viveka alone, by discrimination. What kind of viveka? You say, for example, all pleasure is conditional. All pleasure comes and goes. The only thing that doesn't come and go is me, who's observing things coming and going. So now Arjuna is going to complain, and he's going to say, Yo yam yogastvaya proktaha. This yoga imparted by you, Krishna, says Arjuna. What kind of yoga has Krishna imparted upon Arjuna? The yoga that says, I am Atman, all else is Anatman. That the mind, body belongs to this changing world, which I am supposed to persistently dismiss as not I, Anatma. You heard the phrase neti neti? That's actually a Sanskrit phrase for na iti. You put the A and the I together, join them, you get neti neti. In other words, this whole world, whatever is known to me, is not me. Why? Because the knower and the known can never be the same. That's just pure logic. Thus, whatever is known to me, neti. How about this? Neti. What about this question? Neti, because this question is also known to me. What about that? That's also known to you. That's why you're asking a question. Thus, discard that too. What kind of other yoga has Krishna taught Arjuna? The one that says my nature is uniform and it's the same. My nature as Chaitanya Swarupa never changes. What kind of other yoga? To own up to the fact that I am the witness consciousness, which is ever pure, ever clean, ever pure, ever eternal, ever limitless, ever pristine, ever uncontaminated. To own up to that fact. That kind of yoga. What kind of yoga? Anything known to me cannot be me. Even this class is known to you. Thus, this class has nothing to do with you. And that yoga I am supposed to invoke repeatedly. That kind of yoga, says Arjuna to Krishna. And now he's going to make a complaint. Even though you have taught me all that, Krishna, my problem is etasyaham napashyami chanchalatvat stitim stiram. Meaning what? I do not see this steady vision consistently. I see it for a while, but it doesn't stay. I don't have the super glue. It goes in, it goes out. Why? Because of my mind's agitations. That's what Arjuna is saying. I do not see the staying because of my mind's agitations. I get it, it stays, and then it leaves. Wait. I'm able, says... Oh, you put your hand up?
No.
Oh, good. So Arjuna says, I'm able to receive this knowledge. I'm able to understand this knowledge. My intellect is good. My intellect is sharp. I get it. I heard you. You've repeated the same message 100 times before. No problems there. But you know what my problem is? It just doesn't stay. In the worst crises, it is virtually unfound. So the retention gets a plus and... No, the reception gets a plus and the retention gets a what? A minus. That's the problem for most of us. This is why in Vedanta we divide every student into 3 people, 3 types. You know what they are? Pay attention. First one, Uttama Adhikari. Uttama means excellent, Adhikari means one who is fit for. So the one who is Uttama Adhikari means what? Reception plus 1, retention plus 1. That means not only am I able to receive the knowledge, understand the knowledge, comprehend the knowledge, but when I walk out, it virtually does not leave me. I've got super glue. I have a shock absorber. I'm immune to the worst crises that still stays with me as though my own name. Can you forget your name in crisis? No way. In the same way, Vedanta does not leave you in the worst crisis. Uttama Adhikari. Next type, Madhyama Adhikari. What is a Madhyama Adhikari? Actually, we'll do, before Madhyama, we'll do Adhama Adhikari. This is the opposite. Reception minus 1, retention minus 1. I neither can receive this knowledge, I'm not qualified, I do not understand, I cannot capture the fullness of this message, I do not value this Vedanta, I dismiss it, there's something better out there, and not only that, but I cannot hold anything that I hear. That's the second type. The third type, Madhyama Adhikari. This is where most of us are. What is Madhyama Adhikari? Reception plus 1, retention minus 1. In other words, I have a good intellect, I've heard this before, I've been sufficiently in the spiritual field, I'm quite intelligent, sincerely, and I can understand that my nature of Atma Swarupa is eternal, but it just doesn't stay. Madhyama Adhikari is where generally most Vedantins are. It does not mean anything, it just means that you need to continue the work until it stays. In other words, Aham Brahmanasmi personality gets superimposed by the small ego Ahamkara, small I personality. That's the problem. The big personality, I don't mean big as in ego big, I mean big as in understanding big, that's what Brahman means, gets superimposed by the small I. So Arjuna is who? Madhyama Adhikari. In other words, Arjuna's problem is not Tamaguna. What's Arjuna's problem? Rajaguna. Overactive, hyperactive mind. Constantly thinking. As soon as Arjuna goes into meditation, what happens? He goes on a world tour. In 2 minutes, he's taking a free trip around the world. This is what happens for most meditators. They sincerely want to sit down and meditate on one's nature, Ishvara, Atma Swarupa, Chaitanya Swarupa. But then what happens? Within 2 minutes, you hear a car horn, you remember your journey in America, California, wherever you've been recently. And then somehow you heard the car horn over there, and now it links it together, and now you find yourself in California, even though you're in Australia. So you get a free ticket around the world. Why is this? Because of Rajaguna, excess Rajaguna. So now this complaint is going to get expressed even more further in the next verse, verse 34. Together, Chanchalam hi manah Krishna, Pramati balavadritam, Tasyaham nigraham manye, Vayoriva sudushkaram, Okay, here Arjuna is going to describe his mind, and we're all going to now relate with his mind, because the mind is universal. No one's special. No one has a special mind that's somehow exclusive to this condition. Manah chanchalam. The mind describes Arjuna to Krishna, my mind is fickle. It's highly active. It's wandering. That's the nature of my mind. It is also pramati. Pramati means like an influencer. Not only does my mind in itself is disturbed, but also what happens, it influences all my other indriyas, my sense organs. If the mind is disturbed, what happens? Your vak indriya takes on a representation of the disturbed mind. Disturbed minds means what? I start to speak verbally according to the disturbance of the mind. This is why you can tell if someone speaks angrily, it means what? Their mind is experiencing agitation in accordance with this anger. In other words, the mind churns the entire personality. That's the power of it.
There's a difference between self-inquiry type thinking, which is wandering, I would have thought, and
daydreaming.
Mind daydreaming, which is wandering, which is
Good point.
A different sort of thing, you know?
You see the distinction? One is wondering, that is about your nature, that is self-inquiry. The other one is daydreaming, about spontaneous things that just seem to be pleasant to do in the moment because you've got nothing else to do. So, suppose that your mind is, again, emotionally disturbed because of something that has happened. What happens? Your vak, remember the apyayantu mamangani, vak pranas chakshuhu shrotram palamindriyani. Vak pranas, vak, your speech, Shrotram, ear, chakshuhu, your eyes, take on the representation of the disturbed mind. That's how powerful the mind is. Your eyes are trying to look at the beautiful scene, but what happens? The mind filters and dumps it or influences the eyes according to its own emotion. So thus, what was beautiful before now turns into a darkness. So it overfilters. Now, eyes wandering. Suppose you're looking, okay, you want to take that? Suppose you're, no, that's the door. You want to take the door? Yeah. Suppose that you're looking around. Why do people look around? Did you ever notice when someone's speaking to you, and you're like, and you know, you're speaking to someone, and they're like looking around, right? Did you get that? Why is that? Because their mind is disturbed into something else that has happened in the past. In the same manner, this mind represents, and then what happens, how does this person interpret it? They get offended. Did you ever notice that? If somebody's not looking at you, you take it personally. So this means their own agitation, not only because they haven't addressed it, also now carried over and contaminated somebody else's mind. Because now I'm taking it personally. So now I accumulate another vasana that I am not worthy of talking to you because you're not looking at me. So that's how it continues. Now, also one more thing, example. Did you ever see a body that is walking up and down?
I do that all the time.
Yeah, Rajaguna. But also it's sometimes soothing because it gives your mind something to do. So your body is nothing but a representation of the mind's condition. That's what we're saying. Now, Arjuna is going to say, my mind, take note of these two words. My mind is balavad. My mind is powerful. Balavad is over there, balavad, powerful. It is so powerful, my mind, that is, says Arjuna to Krishna, that even if my intellect says no, my mind says yes. Even if my intellect says, I don't need to worry about this, what does the mind say? Worry about this. In other words, the mind has such a power that it's able to supersede the power of the intellect. For example, did you ever drive behind someone's car and they're seemingly driving slow? And then you rationalize and you say, there's no point overtaking them because how is it going to make a difference? But then our mind still overtakes them. In other words, our emotional satisfaction supersedes our intellectual rationalizing capability. Or sometimes you want to drive, let's say, 2 kilometers faster in a car just to, overtake someone. Is that going to make any difference in real life? 0.0. In fact, the intellect is even going to say, this is potentially going to put my life in danger. But no, the mind still does it. So this is how powerful Balavad, the mind, is. It superimposes its power on top of the intellect. Intellect says concern is useless. Concern only shuts down my intellect. And yet, what does the mind do? It still continues concern regarding different topics. Did you ever have your stomach growl? And then you tell your stomach, please stop growling because it's embarrassing? And then the stomach doesn't listen? Yeah, of course. The mind is exactly the same. We tell our minds, stop. Stop thinking about this thing that is going to come and go. But the mind still does it. It's exactly the same. So, what happens? The mind seems to conquer the intellect. Because why? Of the mind's habitual trenches. Just imagine a trench, a very deep root. It's already established. Why? Because it's been done over and over again. And so it's very hard to come out of that trench. So what does the mind do? It says it's much easier to go inside my little mind maze of the trench than to get out. So it just continues. Also, my mind is dridham, stubbornly firm. Not only is it powerful, but it's stubbornly firm in its power. In other words, it preserves, or it is firm in its own field of worry. What does own field of worry mean? Whatever the subject matter of worry is, family, friends, colleague, person, personal health, tomorrow, yesterday, not only is it powerful, but also it persists in that pattern. It doesn't want to give up. Even though you tell it intellectually, stop, I can't think, I want to do my work, it still does it. For example, metaphor, suppose you never drink coffee, and now you decide intellectually to start drinking coffee. No problem, right? No problem. But what's the problem? No problem, but what's the problem? The body gets used to it. And now, in the future, you now intellectually say and just decide, I want to stop drinking coffee. Is it that easy? Why? Because the body has got used to it, now we have to undergo withdrawal symptoms because of the trenches which have been established through repetitive behavior. That's why the mind is in the same way stubbornly firm. It's got etched trenches which are hard to escape. The habit is exactly the same. You can't just say, stop smoking, or stop doing this, stop doing that. It doesn't work like that. The mind is both powerful and firm. It still continues doing as it wishes. So Balavad and Dridham create what? Split personality. Aham Brahmanasmi, and yet back home, not only is my mind powerful and firm in my old habit patterns, but also I cannot seem to rationalize my way out of them. What we have to know, the most important, is every single Vedantin goes through this process. You're not the only one. We have to go through this process. Okay, so what's the only solution to this? The only solution mode now, is to reorient the mind, which is a painful process, by the way. Suppose you want to stop drinking. What happens? Craving, yeah. It takes a long time to stop drinking. Depression comes, and I have to deal with those trenches. That means I have to consistently reorient the mind towards the vision that is meaningful for you. And that vision, of course, is one of happiness, joy. And also, according to Vedanta, everyone is drunk, by the way. Drunk on what? Emotional dependence. We're depending on one thing or another. If we're not depending on this, we're depending on that. We don't have to share what our dependencies are, but there's a general dependence on different things. Usually on people, someone that's close to us, usually on our job. Our job gives us satisfaction. We feel purposeless without a job. some kind of activity, and without that activity we just sort of feel unworthy or not useful. So this cannot be broken overnight. Just like stopping to drink, you need to what? Be patient. To be sober, you need to be patient. It requires a lot of planning and time. Can't just stop. You need to plan it out. What will I do one thing less today than yesterday? What will I reduce at least 1% today than yesterday? Planning and time. So the process of slow sobering of the mind is called vasana. Vasana means what? Fragrance. Why fragrance? Because fragrances always leave a fragrance, despite them no longer being present. So vasana kshayaha, which means what? Kshayaha means to annihilate. So vasana kshayaha means to annihilate these vasanas. Therefore, vasana kshayaha is slow and painful. If you think this is a one-off journey where one hears some magical statement and they're flying, in seventh heaven, it doesn't work like that. We have to be very realistic because of these powerful trenches of the mind. So remember the story of philosopher? When the philosopher heard the bad news of the crushed ship on the shore, and then he said what? He said what? Okay. He said, what? Right? Now, what was that? Vasana. But as a result, so he's a philosopher, right? Or she's a philosopher. So we're being realistic. He didn't just say, who cares? It's all just one. No, we're being realistic. What? However, what happened then? 2 minutes later, as a result of consistent practice, vasana kshayaha, that is annihilating vasanas, he remembered the Gita class or the Vedanta class or the class that represents this truth, and then it converted into, so what? Do you need to go to the toilet?
No, I was just still someone was.
Okay, cool. So what takes time? Okay? What to so what takes time. And it's not immediate. To think of yourself as someone who just goes so what constantly, immediately, that's quite unrealistic. So we have to be patient with ourselves. If it takes 1 hour, so be it. For some of us it takes 1 minute, but it doesn't matter. What's the difference? The one who takes 1 minute and 1 hour, the one who takes 1 minute has a lot more work behind the scenes. That's all.
Can you fake it till you make it?
Yeah, that's also a very good point. Fake it till you make it. Why? Because it, for example, physiology changes your psychology. In the same manner, vice versa. If you act as though you're already there, then it's going to trick the mind as though you are already there.
Well, it fills up the trenches a bit, doesn't it?
Huh?
Fills up the trenches.
It does fill up the trenches. Act as if. That's a very powerful. Those 3 words, act as if, is life transforming.
Constant faking can become the truth.
Yes. The only thing you can't act as if is moksha. You can't act as if enlightened. Although you can still act as if attributes which derive or which get one to moksha. Like what? Dharma.
Yeah.
Ahimsa.
And self-inquiry will
Right, self-inquiry.
come along with as if.
Yeah, good. Okay, tasya nigraham sudushkaram. Tasya nigraham sudur. I'm just changing the order. So what does Arjuna say? My mind, owning to habitual vasanas, to these trenches, is extremely difficult. It's like the wind. Can you stop the wind? No. Why not? Because the wind is not concrete. Thus, we cannot stop it. In the same way, the subtle, powerful antahkarana, the instrument of the mind, is so subtle, we cannot just verbally say stop and it stops, because it is subtle in nature. You cannot just say stop worrying. It doesn't work like that. So what does Arjuna say? Krishna, you gotta help me, man. Basically. So Arjuna is now asking dear help from Krishna. He's saying, please take me out of these unhealthy habitual patterns. And these will be mentioned in verse 35. before we go to verse 35, I'm now going to go through verse 34 again because this has a second layer of teaching. So I've done verse 34, I'm going to now redo verse 34 from a different angle. Arjuna complains in verse 34 about the wandering nature of the mind. If you're complaining about the wandering nature of your own mind, this verse 34 is very much applicable. And Arjuna also says, I'm unable to focus in a particular field. I can't focus on this knowledge. You gave me these 5 chapters of great knowledge, Atma, Anatma, Viveka, and yet I cannot focus. In other words, Arjuna says, my mind has weak capacity and its childlike wandering nature cannot stop. This is called vikshepa. Yes?
Is it wandering or wandering?
Wandering.
With an A.
Childlike wandering mind. Now this childlike wandering mind is vikshepa. Remember the 4 obstacles I gave you? The second one was vikshepa. Vikshepa included what? Apyasa, viveka, and vairagyam. So this is going to now escalate slowly into these 2 very important practices. So vikshepa, in verse 33, which was mentioned. Okay, before I go forward, why do we meditate? What's the point of meditation?
So that our knowledge can become rooted.
Excellent. That means moksha is very hard unless this knowledge, if nearly impossible, unless this knowledge is firmly rooted. Thus, to dwell in this teaching requires a still mind, a tranquil mind. For that reason, we need to remove the primary obstacle in the mind called vikshepa. Why? For the sake of moksha. I will now get into vikshepa very soon. Arjuna also says that he, as I said, has the steadiness, he has the vision of oneness, he has understood this sufficiently, he is not confused about Atma, Anatma, Viveka, he's very clear on that, and I'm sure most of you are also. So, as we said, Arjuna is what? A Madhyama Atikari. Reception is good, retention is minus. He does not have Jnanam Nishtha. Jnanam Nishtha means what? Knowledge which has firmly transformed into an actual reality. He does not have Jnanam Nishtha. He does not have the personality transformation. He also says, my mind is like a slimy fish. Every time I try to grab my mind, control my mind, it slips out. And I want to know, what can I do about this? So in desperation, then Arjuna is now going to actually cry at Kurukshetra in front of Krishna. This is the moment when Arjuna starts to cry. Because he is like, you told me enough knowledge so far. But honestly, my mind is just controlling me and I cannot stop it. It is outgoing, it is extroverted, and I do not have the power to take whole ownership of it. It is fluid. Did you recognize that? Your mind is fluid. It doesn't stay too long on any particular topic. It is so violent that it is pramadhi, influencer. It actually spills into every other sense organ, and it controls that sense organ also. And Arjuna also says, I thought my mind is what? Antahkarana, instrument which I own, and yet I cannot find that I own this instrument. Even though I own this instrument, and I thought I was the master of this instrument called the mind, I still do not find the reality that I am the master of its mind, of my mind. It seems like my mind is the master of me. In other words, I don't have mano nigrahaha. He also says the mind is dritham. What does dritham mean? My mind is very firmly rooted in its stubbornness, in its stubborn ways of being. Every time I tell it to go away from an unpleasant topic, like a conversation that was full of tension, it refuses to do so. Why am I mentioning this? Because I'm building up a commonality of the mind that we all share. Meaning, what is the mind? Anatma. What is Anatma? Maya. Thus, the mind is balavad, powerful, and the mind is dhrtham, firm. Thus, the world is powerful and it is firm. Therefore, samsara is firm and powerful. So now you can see why it's so hard to get out of samsara, why we're so easily drawn back into the worldly matters. Because of the mind, and the mind is not apart from the world. So if the mind is stuck in anatma, what happens then? It cannot channel itself to atma. See why? Because the mind is single-pointed. It cannot think twice. The mind only has a single direction of thinking. So if it's thinking about the worldly stuff all day long, it is not thinking about what? Its nature, Atma Swarupa. If it's thinking about its nature, Atma Swarupa, then it's not thinking about worldly stuff, Anatma. That's just the nature of the mind. So you have to take advantage that your mind is a single pointed instrument. I know we're going to say we can multitask, but the truth of the nature of the mind is it's single pointed. Therefore, tasyaham nigraham. It is difficult to control. Managing, I consider it to be most difficult. That's why the scriptures say mano jayaha. Mano means mind, jayaha means to conquer. The scriptures say you can conquer the entire world of the external appearances, but have you conquered your own mind? Also Lao Tzu Lao Tzu also says the same thing. So therefore, Arjuna asks for what? A mind management consultant. And that's going to be Krishna, who is now going to speak in verse 35. Verse 35 together. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Asam Shayam Mahabaho Mano Durnigraham Chalam Abhyase Natu Kaunteya Vairagyena Chagrhyate. Okay, back to Bhagavan. So Bhagavan is now going to consolidate Arjuna and present finally the solution to this mind problem. So far I've been talking simply about the problem. Now I'm going to bring the solution. And this remedy is to what? Vikshepa. Because I said Vikshepa is the biggest problem of the mind. Vikshepa means the mind's extroverted. It is rajasic. So the first thing that Krishna does is he points out that this Vikshepa problem is not a unique problem only to you. This Vikshepa problem of extrovertedness, unable to focus, is a universal problem that we all share. This is an instant big relief for Arjuna. Did you ever have a power cut in your house? Oh, this happens more. This is probably not appropriate in Australia. We never have power cuts here.
Yeah, we do.
They do? Okay. What's the first thing you do when there's a power cut?
Phone up to see if everybody else is
Excellent. What happens when you see other people's houses also don't have power? You get a big relief. If I see other people suffering, I have a big relief. In other words, if I know that other people also share this mind problem of vikshepa, extrovertedness, constant agitation, then instantly what happens, there's a big relief that I am not the only one, I am not unique after all. Everyone shares this problem. So therefore, Arjuna intelligently consolidates, Krishna consolidates Arjuna and says, you're not the only one. I understand where you're at. So what's the solution? First, acknowledge your problem. Accept that you have the problem, honestly. And only then, the solution will not have fear of approaching you. Did you know that the remedies also have fear of rejection? Because the remedy is standing, waiting to help. But the person is not emitting openness to be helped. Why? because they're not acknowledging that they have a problem in the first place. So how do you consolidate the remedy? By firstly acknowledging and accepting to yourself that I indeed have this problem with my mind. Only then the remedy is going to come gladly. Also in Alcoholics Anonymous, you've probably heard that. Alcoholics Anonymous? Yeah. The first step that they have is they firstly acknowledge the problem and they say, I accept that I have a problem and I am unable to help myself. Thus, because of my helplessness, I need help. Same thing. It's a very good system in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a 12-step program. Not that I've been there, but I know it very well. So only when you accept and acknowledge the problem, the solution is able to come. So Krishna says to Arjuna, you're not the only one. So what's the psychology? If you recognize we all have the same problem, you're instantly relieved. So that's what Krishna does very intelligently. Why? To make Arjuna stop crying. So maybe if you want to, make people comfortable, then just, understand where they're coming from and say, I too share your problem, right? So you're making it on an even basis. Otherwise, if they say, oh, this is my problem alone, it's very painful to hold that. Mahabaho, this is where Krishna starts to intelligently now tease Arjuna. What does tease Arjuna mean? What is Arjuna? He's a warrior. And he is very good at what he does. He's very rajasic. And he has won many battles with the Pandavas, his brothers. So Krishna says to him, you've won all these great battles and you've done very good at what you do. You do a very good job, but you haven't still handled your mind. You still haven't addressed the primary problem. So he's not, putting out kind of directly. He's just kind of subtly teasing Arjuna to bring to awareness. And he says, you need to develop this inner strength, my friend. Have you considered that? So now Arjuna starts to think. And what else does Krishna say? Mano durnigraham chalam. See, the consolidation begins. Indeed, the mind, and I understand the mind is powerful. It is outgoing and it is fickle. It is hard to manage. Thus, accept this fact that you're not the only one. But, here's the big but. It is hard, very, very hard, but it is not impossible. There's a big difference between hard and impossible. So yes, it is hard to manage the mind, but it is not impossible. Which means, how is it not impossible? If you employ the right strategies, strategy is upayaha, which is called what? Now we're going to solution mode, called vairagyam and viveka. If you employ these two strategies, it is not impossible. So now we go into the actual discussion how to conquer the mind with these two strategies. Which first one? Discrimination, viveka. Second one, vairagyam, dispassion, detachment. Also Patanjali very beautifully says abhyasa. Okay, so abhyasena, this is from the Gita. Abhyasena, practice, that is viveka, and vairagyena, so that is detachment. And also Patanjali Yoga Sutra says very beautifully, abhyasa vairagya pyam tat siddhihi. Siddhihi means perfection. That means through abhyasa of what? Discrimination, and through vairagyam, dispassion, you will attain siddhihi. You probably heard siddhi before. You will attain perfection. So you can see how we're joining these two texts and finding commonalities between them.
It's just a quick question. Is that the English on the slide there? Is that a translation or is that someone else's commentary on that verse?
This is Dayananda's commentaries, but I don't need Dayananda's comment. I just translate by my.
Oh, you're just translating from. Okay.
Because to take Dayananda's commentaries, I get limited by my own understanding.
So you're going straight from the...
Yeah, okay. Yeah. It doesn't matter. It all comes to the same understanding. So whether you take Paramarthananda, Dayananda, Chinmaya, Tejomayananda, James, Nima, whoever you take, it's all going to be the exact same commentaries, end of the day. It's going to be different words, but the same message.
So they're different commentaries when you go to each section?
They're not commentaries, these are direct translations.
Oh, they're direct translations.
Yeah, but so if I translate the whole thing, you probably come up with this.
Okay.
Okay. So, two practices, Viveka and Vairagya Pyam. Now, Apyasaha, the first one. Apyasaha means what? Viveka. Discrimination. So the question is, how do you develop practice for discipline? For mind discipline. Mind discipline means what? Mano nigrahaha. Pay attention. How do you develop discipline for something? Mind always dwells on what? Whatever it is interested in. Are you interested in something? Think of something that you're interested in right now. Don't tell me. You got it? Like you're very, very interested. You love it. Maybe it's your work. Maybe it's something that you love. Are you distracted when you're doing it? No. Do you need to meditate to think about it? Does it come spontaneously without having to sit down and close your eyes and go, okay, let's go to asanam, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyanam, samadhi? Are you naturally thinking about it? In other words, whatever you are naturally interested in, automatically, without any distraction, you find you are absorbed in it spontaneously without having to think about it. This is why from the beginning I said meditation in Vedanta and in the Nityasanam is not solely closing your eyes, it is just being absorbed in this knowledge. For example, I love to read romance novels. Did you know that? When I read romance novels, I forget everything. I forget the world. I forget Vedanta, I forget everything. I forget that I'm hungry, I forget time, I forget space. I'm totally absorbed. I have nirvikalpa samadhi reading romance novels. Did you know that I love to watch UFC, Ultimate Fighting Champions? When I watch UFC, I am totally absorbed in what's going on, like Bruce Lee and so on. I forget about the world. I don't need to go into meditation and experience nirvikalpa samadhi and go into an effort mode of trying to maintain my focus on UFC, romance novels, UFC. It's just automatic. Why? Because my interest is in both of them. By the way, when I say I'm just referring to the common man, not to Andre. So, what does this mean? If your interest is developed in a particular field, what happens? The mind automatically enjoys dwelling in that field with 100% concentration. And nobody has to teach you how to be concentrated. So concentration is not the problem. You give poker to men who come from a very busy afternoon. They'll play for 5 hours. Concentration has never been the problem. The lack of interest in a particular field has been the problem. Thus, if I am not dwelling on Ishvara, why? Because I have not established the value for Ishvara, thus automatically the mind goes back into what it values, which is whatever it values in your life. So what does this mean? The question we're going to pose is, how do you now develop an interest in a particular field? And the answer is, by developing greatness, or seeing the superiority in that subject, seeing the value in that subject, how it's wonderful for me, how it will help me, how my life will change, how everything will turn out for the better. This is why I keep saying, if you do not engage and take advantage of this what's in it for me, WIIFM concept, then Vedanta is not going to work. The mind is going to default back to what it finds naturally interesting, which means whatever you love is what you spontaneously drop into without any effort. What does this mean? How do you develop love for an object? By seeing value in an object. And how do you develop value in an object? What does value mean? what is important. That's what values mean. If you do 5 top values in your life, number 1, whatever number 1 is in your life, that is probably what you are putting most of your attention in most of the time without any effort, automatically. So what's our point? To bring moksha all the way to number 1. So the question is, how do you bring moksha all the way to number 1? Attempting to understand the importance of that which I'm trying to love. Attempting to see the value, the beauty, the greatness, the glory, the perfection, the benefit in what I am trying to attain. And this is called viveka apyasaha. Viveka means what? Discrimination. Apyasaha means practice. So when I develop viveka apyasaha, I am seeing the superiority of something repeatedly on and on. How? By talking about it, sharing about it, reading books about it, listening about it. What happens through repetition? You absorb your mind in the subject matter and you develop love for it. Thus, the question is, how do you develop love for God, for moksha, for beauty, for happiness? By reading books, being absorbed in the subject matter. So knowing one's greatness is, so to know the beauty of moksha and to know the highest purpose in life motivates you to do what? Study dharma, a lot of it, knowing that dharma leads to moksha. There is no moksha without dharma. This is why, if you think about it, and if you read common scriptures, no matter what religion they're coming from, what do all religions do? They start first, before anything else, describing the glory of God, the beauty of, the superiority of Ishvara. Why? Because it builds reverence, it builds love, it hooks the reader into so they won't give up and go into something else. What do the scriptures do? They talk about the dependence, how the person is to depend on God and less on the world. In other words, the scriptures talk about depend less on the world, depend more on Ishvara. Of course, later on we will discover that to depend on Ishvara is actually to depend on yourself. Why? Because there are, okay, let's put a logic to it. What sustains this world? Okay, just forget about that question. Imagine beads. What holds the beads together? The invisible string. If I pull that invisible string for 1 second, what's going to fall? What's going to happen? I just gave you the answer. All of the beads are going to fall apart. Thus, the only reason why this world is persisting without any abrupt breaks is why? Because there is something holding it consistently. You don't suddenly see some weird jump from a leaf goes from here to here. You see a beautiful, smooth movement from here to there. So this means the one pattern, the one thread which holds this universe is Ishvara. Which means what? Ishvara is ever present. But what's also present? Your awareness. Tell me one moment when you're not aware. You can't find it. And even if you tell me, I'm just going to say, well, that's really interesting. How do you know about that moment? Because you're aware of that moment. So this means Ishvara is ever present, awareness is ever present, thus there is no essential difference between them. So the message is there's no real difference between Ishvara and the self. So what does this mean? Ishvara dependence means self-dependence. Self-dependence means independence. Independence means, okay, what is truly independent? Does your awareness depend on something else to be aware?
No.
Thus, Brahman is truly independent. So, Ishvara dependence, world dependence, to Ishvara dependence, to self-dependence, to independence. And what is independence? Moksha. To be truly independent of this world, where the person has no need to be alive nor dead, where it doesn't really matter, that is called independence. I don't really care whether this body is alive, whether it's dead. It has nothing to do with me because I'm free of the body. That is what independence means. So that is the stage that we're going to. So the question is now, is there anything wrong with worldly dependence? No, of course not. But there is a risk. What's the risk of worldly dependence?
Indulgence?
Huh?
Indulgence?
Fluctuating. Overindulgence if you're not careful. It's fleeting. It's perishable. So if you analyze all of your life sorrows, you'll come to one single conclusion. And it goes like this. All of the sorrows that you've gotten in life were a result of over-depending on something which I should have not depended on entirely. Think about it. Whatever brings sorrow in life, if you analyze it in retrospect, from the point of view of the present, you will see the only reason why I've gotten sorrow is because gave too much permission to have too much attachment to that object. And I should have not done it. If I didn't, then I would have not suffered so much. That's the risk of worldly attachments. So this means that the person needs to have this kind of discrimination between what? Strong and weak. Perishable and imperishable. Suppose there is a drowning man and there is a big stick, a thick stick and a straw, and the man takes the straw. Is that going to help? No. What's going to happen? The man is going to sink in the ocean of samsara. In the same way, if the person does not have viveka between the strong, that is the imperishable, and the weak, that is the perishable, then what's going to happen? I'm going to grab something which inherently does not have the strength to sustain the joy that I'm looking for, thus it is not going to last. So this means viveka is knowing the difference between what is strong and what is weak. What is nityam, that is imperishable, and what is anityam, perishable. What is secure and what is unsecure. What is the most secure thing in the world? Yourself. Why? Because you're always present. You're never not present to yourself. And so this is called nitya. Nitya means what? It's a new word I'm introducing. Imperishable. Nitya, anitya, vastu viveka. Vastu means thing. That means knowing the difference between what is strong, what is weak, what is perishable, what is imperishable. So what does this Shastra teach? This is the message of the Shastra. Rely more on Ishvara, Nitya, and rely less on the world, which is Anitya. And this habit can be indeed developed. So this is all that religion does. It just converts your reliance from world to God alone, to Ishvara. Which means to de-addict yourself from the unhealthy, you need to what? Create an addiction to the healthy. By the way, you cannot get rid of addictions, you can only form addictions to new things. You cannot get rid of old habits, you can only develop habits for healthy things. Because the mind's nature is always to be sticking onto something that it finds comfort in. So, okay, then what is an unhealthy addiction? Let's investigate that. What is an unhelpful habit? Answer, something or to depend on something that is perishable. If you're depending on girlfriend, boyfriend to make you happy, that's called, in Vedantic terms, an unhealthy habit. Why? Because I do not know when they're going to leave and I do not know when my own relationship to them is going to change. So for example, I'll just give you a metaphor. Suppose that you are given a beautiful chair and the chair is decorated. It is like gorgeous, it is colorful, it is shining, it is really glamorous, it's exuberant, it is flamboyant, it is all of the right decorations are on this chair. And you're given this chair, but you're told one exception. And that exception is you cannot sit on it. We didn't say you should destroy the chair, by the way. We just said don't sit on it. Now I know what you're asking. What's the correlation between the chair and what I'm talking about? Suppose that You sit on the chair. How long is this? Because it's a, did I say it's a cardboard chair?
No.
So, okay, so it's a cardboard chair and it's beautiful. What happens when you sit on a cardboard chair? It's a beautiful chair, by the way, and it's a cardboard chair. Is it going to hold your weight? It will for a while. That means that which is beautiful surely attracts my attention, no doubt. It is charming, it is seductive, it is irresistible. I want to participate in it. And when I do sit on it, when I transact, when I engage with it, I do experience this joy because it is a beautiful chair. It's a cardboard chair. But every cardboard chair, through withering of the time, collapses eventually. So what is the only kind of chair that can sustain you? That kind of chair which is strong. And a strong chair isn't necessarily pretty. It is just a strong chair. So question, would you rather sit on one beautiful chair after another beautiful chair, constantly collapsing and hurting yourself, or sit on a normal chair which is just strong, a firm foundation? Which one? Firm, strong foundation. And the only strong, firm foundational chair in the universe is Ishvara alone. That's what we're saying is you don't have to throw your pretty cardboard chair out, appreciate it, but just remember not to grab onto it or sit too long onto it. Why? Because it will eventually collapse. And when it does, the person, after hurting their bum so many times, will then come to the conclusion that it is not worth it. Thus, I'm going to start searching for a permanent chair. So what's the conclusion in regards to this cardboard chair analogy? To sit on a strong chair is viveka. Why? What does viveka mean? Knowing the difference between strong and weak. Nitya, anitya. Secure, unsecure. The beautiful, shiny, glamorous cardboard chair is essentially weak. It doesn't have a strong foundation. So what is viveka? Choosing between the two to sit on that foundation which is there to support me eternally. And there is no greater security than sitting on the lap of Ishvara. And what is then, in relation to the metaphor of the chair, coming off the attractive chair? This is called what? If I get off the attractive chair, before it's got collapsed, it's not collapsed yet, right? But I get off the chair. What is that a metaphor for? Detachment, vairagyam, dispassion. To identify that it is a beautiful chair, but it is risky to put all my time and effort participating in that chair alone. Thus, to sit on a strong chair is viveka. To get off the beautiful cardboard decorated, mega flamboyant, exuberant chair is vairagyam. And in the same manner, this vairagyam is also what? Coming out of the chair of emotional dependence. I already said earlier that Vedanta says very clearly we are all, at one level or another, drunk on emotional dependence on a person, on boyfriend, girlfriend, on spouse, on children, on health, on living longer, on beauty, extending our life, on being important in the society, on being rich. And yet, all of that eventually will go away. So this emotional dependence, which will go away, has to be assessed. Is it really worth putting all my time and energy into it? So let's summarize. So what does Krishna recommend? Abhyasena, practice of what? Viveka. Viveka is what? Knowing what belongs to where. Knowing the difference between what is good, what is healthy and unhealthy. What is lasting and what is short, what is passing. He also says to dwell on the Shastra. Shastra means the Vedanta, Shastra, reminding you of your nature. And what else does Krishna say? To develop love for Shastra. How do you develop love for Shastra? Go back into the mode of being interested in something. Somebody tell me. How do you develop love for Shastra? Reading, listening, constantly, non-stop. You're helping your mind to develop love for that topic which is going to lead you to the highest purpose in life. In other words, you are dwelling on this truth as often as humanly possible. Before we close, the often commonly heard complaint in Vedanta is it's dry. It is not dry. Once you get into Vedanta and you get the beauty of its intricacies and its explanations, it is actually the most beautiful, juicy topic in creation. There's just nothing that beats Vedanta. How do you develop this juiciness for Vedanta? Dwelling on the knowledge. What does this do? It rechannelizes the single-pointed nature of the mind from what? From the worldly, beautiful cardboard chairs into the ordinary, stable, reliable, eternal chair, which is Ishvara alone. And remember, Ishvara's nature and your nature are not apart. Thus, you're learning to ultimately depend on yourself alone. Asamyatatmana yogaha dushprapa iti me matihi vashyatmana tu yatata shakya vaptum upayataha. So this is verse 36, and it's going to clarify verse 35. Now in verse 35 we talked about two means, two strategies for helping the agitating mind, which is through identification between the perishable, that is the fake. I'm going to use a new word now. Don't get offended by the word fake. The perishable, the fake, and the real or the imperishable. Anityam and nityam. Anityam means perishable. Nityam means imperishable. So, when this viveka is not practiced, what happens? We call that ashamyatat mana, which means the mind is unrestrained. That first word. So if I don't practice what? Viveka and vairagyam, then the mind is, it's not asham, it's asamyatatma. It is unrestrained. Unrestrained from what? Unrestrained from anitya to nitya. Unrestrained from unhealthy to the healthy. Unrestrained from artha, kama to dharma, moksha. In other words, it is unrestrained from those things which lead one into what? Worldly entanglements, into sitting on the beautiful decorated cardboard chair. That's what it's unrestrained from. So if it's not restrained, what happens? The mind goes to external charms. External charms like the chair I spoke of. And for such a person, yogaha dushprayaha, for that person, meditation is not possible. Why? Because when they sit in meditation, they start valuing cheap things. Do you value cheap things? Okay, maybe you do. But why do I use the word cheap? Because when something's cheap, we generally don't value it. But what happens in meditation? When we close our eyes, we start valuing cheap anatma-related things. Things that come and go. When we sit in meditation, what happens? Or puja, mind starts entertaining something that is unworthy. Something that we know is going to end eventually. So, now let's convert. Let's change the tone. When you do, now this is going to be an analogy. When you do have an interest in something, do you sit in asanam? Think of something you like. Do you have to sit in this weird yoga posture to do what you love? Absolutely not. Do you have to close your eyes? Absolutely not. Do you have to do any of this yoga Patanjali Sutra 8 steps? Absolutely not. Unnecessary. So wherever you take your interest is exactly where your mind effortlessly achieves this concentration, wherever that happens to be. For example, we'll use this beautiful analogy. A mother who is a mother of a first newborn baby, does she have to sit in meditation and think about her baby? Huh? Does she have to close her eyes for the baby image to come? Absolutely not. She can be in the most stressful environment, at work, in worldly transactions, And you know what her problem is? She actually can't take her mind off her child. Her child is her life. Why? Because she loves the child. She values the child. In other words, whatever you value, whatever you love, you automatically, your mind that is, automatically goes into that. Which means because of her child, she enjoys being the mother. Because of this beautiful journey of dharma and moksha, one cannot help themselves but to entertain thoughts of Vedanta, to be in this study of Vedanta. Similarly, a controlled mind, vashyat mana, this word atma doesn't always mean self, as in Satchidananda, it also means mind. You have to know the context. In the same manner, this mind is the result of what? This controlled mind. That's what vashyatma means. This controlled mind is the result of viveka. What does viveka mean? Knowing your priorities. Lower, higher priorities. Now, I know what you're going to say. That depends on what stage you're at. For a 5-year-old child, you give them $2 million, what's going to happen? Their priorities are what? In the corner of the room playing with their toys. Of course, when the child now converts into an adult, then those toys are now as equal as the $2 million was when they were 5 years old. So priorities always change. In the same manner, to have viveka is to know your priorities pertinent, which means what? Which are applicable to the journey or your life stage in the moment. That's what viveka means. To have discernment of what is important for me and to stay with what is important for me. To have an idea to categorize things and know what belongs to where. But that's not enough. You know why? Even though you know what is important, is that enough? No. Why? Because you need to detach from those things which keep your attention away from what is important. Thus, vairagyam is the second. If I don't detach and I get off this beautiful decorated chair, then how am I supposed to sit on the solid chair of Ishvara? In other words, you need both viveka and vairagyam in order for this to work out. So in other words, this means having your priorities clear. And why clear? Because yatata means because one has strived or one strives to dedicate quality time, yatata, to Vedantic study. So how do you develop this viveka and vairagyam? Yatata, by striving to do so. What does striving to do so means? Investing solid, firm, quality time, saying, this is time for myself alone, and I choose not to be disturbed by it because this matters to me. They're taking that stand, that importance. Knowing and recognizing the utility of Vedanta alone is enough for you to continue in the Vedantic scriptures. Also, one last point, in order to be interested in Vedanta, you need a special kind of mind. Why? Because if you've noticed, Vedanta, nor the Gita, nor the Upanishads promise anything that's material. They only promise something that is very abstract. Thus, to appreciate the abstract says a lot about your mind alone. Which means what? It's a very subtle mind. To be listening to Vedanta, to be coming here, means what? You appreciate the subtle aspects of life which are not easily picked up by a mind that is expressing and looking at the gross aspects. Which is why the qualification for Vedanta is not so big. But that's okay. What's the conclusion? Let's close this off. Meditation is only possible through a disciplined mind. Disciplined mind means what? 2 upayahas, 2 strategies, 1 vairagyam, the second viveka. Vairagyam means to disassociate from the lower in order to attend to the higher which was established in viveka. And the second is to learn to depend on Ishvara more and more and more, and less on the perishable worldly objects. In other words, learn to depend on the borehole of Ishwara's holy water instead of depending on the public water supply. Why? Because the public water supply eventually gets exhausted, and yet Ishwara's borehole of holy water is always inexhaustible. And of course, the beauty of this is you eventually realize there's actually no difference between yourself and Ishwara. So that concludes verse 36, and verse 37 is going to change the topic next week into something else, which you will have to come back to see what it is. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.